Jay, I am so excited to be speaking to you today about X-Men Mutant Academy. I have been trying to hunt you people down for such a while.
Well, that's what us mutants get done to us. We get hunted down. So,
And I was telling you this before we hit record just now. There's so many people in the Power of X-Men Familia that engage with our podcast and our video content, and they always talk about Mutant Academy. And I think you guys, it was just such a great time for the X-Men in the early aughts because you had the X-Men movie and this game, man, it still slaps till today.
well, I'm glad to hear that. It was funny when you emailed me. It had been a long, long time since anybody had brought that game up to me, and I was like, wow, it's been a while, hasn't it? It's been a hot minute since I've been on that game, and it kind of put me down a little trip through memory lane. So I'm really pleased to hear that you get that kind of feedback because you work on a game and then you move on to the next one, and sometimes you lose track of any sort of idea of the impact it might have had. So I'm really that's really awesome to hear. A lot of really talented people worked on that game, and to bring that thing to life, and under some reasonably challenging circumstances. So that's great. Thanks.
It's ludicrous to me that you haven't been asked about Mutant Academy for a long time because again, the DMs, anytime I post something, because you guys have beautiful graphics from there and like great cutscenes that I still think hold up till today. And some people will just be like, you need to interview people from this. And even when we did the X-Men Legend series and the Mutant, Mutant Alliance, excuse me, the Ultimate Alliance series, people are like, but you got to do Mutant Academy. You have to do Mutant Academy.
Well, awesome. Yeah, it was a really big part of my life for a very concentrated period of time, and it was a hell of an adventure to make that thing. So I'm glad to hear it. It was a pretty interesting time in the history of both Marvel and Activision, which is the company that published the game and produced it. So yeah, I'm here to answer all the questions I can. It's just funny because, to be honest, and I want to set some expectations, producers don't get a lot of these. It's usually a designer or a director or something, one of the more traditionally known as a creative type. So, bear with me. I was definitely involved in a lot of aspects of this game, though, so I should be able to answer a lot of questions for you.
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning of your journey because we love video games here at Power of X-Men, and I want to know, what was the first video game you ever played?
Well, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, because the first commercial video game, arcade game of any sort of real importance was the year it was released, the year I was born. So I've kind of grown up with the video game industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so I probably was exposed to some of the really early video games, the arcade games, but probably not old enough to really play them or remember them. But the one that I really remember first was my dad went and played racquetball at this health club, and he'd take me, and I was supposed to be watching the racquetball, but right off to the side over there was a stand-up of Space Invaders.
Yes.
And the thing in your track mode, you just hear the dun, 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 dun. And I couldn't, it was like a siren song.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just over there watching it. And every once in a while, if I could, beg, borrow, or steal some quarters, I'd play it. I wasn't very good because, I'm probably 8 years old at the time. But I was just enthralled with whatever was coming out of this machine. And it just had this glow, and it had this mirrored half glass that would kind of impart some color to it, which shouldn't have even have been possible with the technology at the time. You're like, where is this coming from? And so that was really the thing that first got me into it. And then really the first thing I had at home was an Atari 2600. And actually we had the Sears branded version of the Atari 2600.
Oh, yeah, you did.
We weren't the kind of family would own a actual Atari. We had the Sears branded version. But I played an awful lot of Pitfall on that thing, which is ironic because that ended up being the first game I ever really worked on that got released. So, Pitfall and any of the arcade adaptations, and there was a game called Combat, and
Mhm.
you just take these little janky little like T-shaped tanks, and you'd kind of go through a maze and try to shoot a little dot at each other. It was like a more combat oriented Pong. It was pretty fun. You could even kind of bend the shots around corners and stuff.
So cool, man.
Yeah, yeah. And then from then on, I just kind of sucked it all in.
Well, it's funny what you said about going to your dad's racket club and being enticed by the arcade. I mean, same thing for me. And I feel so bad for kids these days who don't get to go to like Pizza Hut, for example,
Yeah,
and see the glow of the arcade or even the movie theater. I see the arcade at the movie theater still, and no one plays there, but like you see that glow and you're praying your mom or in your or in your pockets, you have a quarter and you can go and you can just play this game and you go home and you don't play the game. That's it. Like that's it. The
yeah.
only time you can play is there. And it sparks such a curiosity, and such a passion. For me, it was Street Fighter 2 and the X-Men arcade game, obviously.
Okay, yeah.
That's where it got me. But
All right. Well, is that because you were already into X-Men, or because just it just was a kind of a happenstance that's where you were at?
it was a happenstance. I mean, my cousin and I were into like everything. You know what I mean? I don't think I was a real X-Men fan until later on, when I started reading the comic books and collecting the trading cards. But like, an arcade is an arcade, especially in the 80s and 90s. So you just
Hmm.
go there and you play everything. And Street Fighter and X-Men, and those were the big ones that we
Right.
played with. But I just love video games in general. But
People who didn't grow up at that time I don't think can understand the magic of an arcade where you'd walk in the door and it was dark and the
yeah.
only light was really coming off the glows of these machines, and they would be all lined up and it'd just be this cacophony of sound, and some sound would just pull you to it, and you'd come and see, what was going on over there and decide whether that was where you wanted to lose your money. And then you just like line up your quarters on this little ledge at the top, and just
Yeah.
get ready to get ready to go.
And if you were lucky, they had like one of those like coin exchanges where you put in $1 and you get four quarters out.
Yeah, or tokens.
Or tokens. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, it's funny because the only time I see an arcade now is an adult arcade where you go, you get drinks and you play these vintage games
Right.
there.
Yep.
But we're talking, folks at home, these are like hardcore like arcades. Like your purpose is to go in there not to drink, but just to play games. And it was a vibe, man. It was a great time.
Yeah, and if there was any like some hot shot, everybody would just kind of start standing around that guy and watch him go to
Yes.
town and try to get. If you watch the King of Kong, it was like that. Just watch this guy, and he's usually probably I don't know, he's probably a teenager or something, but to your 10-year-old self, this guy is some sort of rock star.
He's like a god, man. Like
Yeah.
no one. It's so funny you said that because one of my memories of playing Street Fighter at the arcade was against this guy who at the time must have been 15, but I was like 8 or something like that. But I thought he was like the biggest shot ever. And he was such an arrogant like person to
Mm.
me. He was
Yeah.
here like, watch me get a perfect on this. And I was like, oh no, I may go down, but you're not getting a perfect. You know what I mean? And I Hadouken him for once, and I was able to get him. But
Awesome. Well,
that
I
was
didn't have
fun.
that kind of luck usually with the teenagers that were hot shots on those games, but they did have attitudes. That was crazy. But
So was it this experience, the Sears Atari, the going to the racket club with your dad and playing Space Invaders? Was it all of that kind of like sparked your curiosity in working in video games?
probably not so much working in them. So I think what was probably more formative, they were around for sure, and I was fascinated by them, and they kind of piqued this part of my curiosity and my creative mind that
Mhm.
I was really into them. But in terms of ever thinking that there was a career behind them or something that I could do with them, really didn't happen until maybe a little later. So my dad was in something called MIS, which was kind of the old version of IT, but in sort of a management capacity and so they would kind of decide what kind of computer systems that big corporations would have, and how to integrate those into their business plans. And I remember one time in 1981, he brought home this giant case. It was like a briefcase made out of kind of foam. And when you open up the clamshell of the foam, and inside of it was a computer. It was
Ah,
an HP 85. And let me just describe this thing because it's going to seem like foreign, I think, to anybody who this computer was all in one piece. So it had a little screen on the left-hand side, and it was it was really tiny, maybe yay big, black and white screen. On the right side, it had a cartridge drive, and so it kind of looked like, it's a little cassette, but not as skinny as a cassette. So it kind of looked like a video camcorder tape, if you're even old enough to remember those. And then it had a printer that was kind of like a wide calculator type printer on the top. And so it was just this whole integrated thing. And so, when he wasn't using it for work, he'd show me how to load up programs off of the tape. And there was really only one tape that I was allowed to use. And it was the one that had the games on it. And there were these rudimentary games. I think they had something like a lunar lander type thing, and Hunt the Wumpus, and a maze generator. And he didn't like me to use the maze generator because you had to print the mazes, and it used up the paper. And so didn't
I
like that.
remember
But
those days, not being able to use the paper at home and all that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, I think it scarred me because now I'm like not. I really hate printing things now because like I don't want to use the paper. But it had this game called Skier, and that I spent most of my time on that, I think. And it was weird. It had little flags going kind of down the screen in a kind of a pattern, and you'd have to keep a dot between the flags or something like that. And so I was fascinated by, and because I had some sort of interaction with the operating system of this machine, it just started to dawn on me that, oh, humans make these things. Humans, are able to manipulate these machines to make these things, and that's pretty cool. And then we had like the first IBM PC that was ever made. It was in 1981. It still had a port for a cassette loader mechanism on the back, but you just use these floppy disks. And it came with a game, but it was really bad. It was like a race car that went down a street, down a road, and avoided donkeys. And I was like, okay, is this all
those
this
were the
thing can do?
days.
Yeah. But then we brought home a sort of the first RPG that I'd ever seen. It was called Temple of Apshai, and it was kind of a dungeon crawler kind of a thing. And it really piqued my imagination. It really kind of drew me in, and it turned out if you could break out of the program and you could see the underlying code.
Mm.
And so I was then able to kind of see behind the curtain a little bit and go, okay, this is how a game is made. Now I couldn't understand all of the code. It was, but the first time that it was actually kind of human readable stuff that I could see, and I was like, oh, I got to do this myself. And so they used to have computer classes in elementary school,
Oh,
and
I
you'd go and you
remember.
sit on the Apple II pluses or whatever.
Is that the one
And
with the turtle that you put in the command and the turtle would move around?
so that was one of the programs you could do. But I spent all my time programming in graphics. Like you'd get this graph paper and you'd draw out the kind of picture you'd want, and then you could program how to plot those graphics out.
Interesting.
Well, at some point, I wrote a basic program where I basically made a Galaga, where I had this little kind of shooter turret down at the bottom, and you could move it left or right, and it would shoot at objects coming down the screen. And it was, it was not great, but for, it really told me that if I could think of something, there was a way for me to get that up on a screen, and that was really cool. And I think that was probably the moment that I started kind of considering that it might be a real career. Although, not in third grade, you're not really thinking, hey, what am I going to do
With my life, how am I
for the
going to
rest
pay
of my
my
life?
mortgage? How am I going to pay my mortgage?
No, I don't think I'd started plotting how I was going to do anything at that point, but
No.
I certainly was hooked in it. From then on, I'd get computer magazines, and they would have, how to program sprites, and you would have page after page, and you'd have to transcribe the code from the page and then try to run it and figure out where you'd mistyped something, and then you'd go, okay, now I know how to do this. Now let me do my own.
Yeah.
And so I was making games from then until pretty much graduated high school, and nothing was ever of any sort of significant, awesomeness or anything, but it was something that I was always drawn to.
Yeah. And then so once you graduated high school and you sort of have those things under your belts and all that experience from just, toying around with the games and figuring out coding, did you go to college specifically for coding, computers, etc.? No.
No.
You're
So I
like, I
took
would, what did you go to college for?
so I took a little detour. That wasn't the only thing I was passionate about,
Yeah.
and I'd been making my own films since I was
Oh,
also in grade school. And
I love
so
that.
I was really just all in on filmmaking, and um, so I went to the University of Southern California in their cinema television program,
All right, man.
and
That's a good place to go.
it was the best film school in the country, and it was a long shot for a kid from the suburbs of Chicago to think that he
Yeah.
could travel that far away to go to a school, but I had
Yeah, you don't
really
have Lori Loughlin or Felicity Huffman backing your tuition, so
no, but oddly enough, I was actually legitimately a rower there. So
wait, really? Were you?
yeah, yeah. So I have pictures I didn't have to Photoshop of that somewhere. And so that was a weird segue, but yeah, I had a really great time there. But for my senior thesis project, I just still had this complete attraction to the technology of things, and they didn't have a video games program yet, but they did have kind of a technology department for the film school, and I went and I petitioned the dean to do an interactive game project, and I kind of couched it as an interactive movie. But what I was really thinking is, these CD-ROMs that had come out a few years before, people were making games out of those, and that was what a great way to juxtapose this kind of film language that I've been using, but to just put it into a new medium. And so they were like, "Yeah, sounds great." And so that's what I did for my senior thesis project. And at that point, I think it was kind of clear that I didn't necessarily want to work in straight film at that
Yeah.
point. I wanted to do something that had to do with technology, for sure.
Okay.
It still took a little while to get around to that. So right after college, my first real job was working at a company called Metrolight Studios, and they were a computer graphics CG post-production house. And so they did some of the special effects for movies like Total Recall. So you remember that scene where Schwarzenegger goes through the X-ray machine, and all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden he's a skeleton, and they have the whole kind of scene all
Yeah.
done as skeletons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they did that, and they won an Oscar as part of that production. And they did things like Virtuosity, and I remember them even working on Happy Gilmore, which is,
Oh,
you wouldn't think that had CG in it, but they had to erase some wires and make the golf
okay.
ball do some things that weren't possible to do in practical effects.
It's so funny that you mentioned both of these, movies, because one, Total Recall, was a big hallmark of my childhood. I mean, I can just remember it and watching it. And then Happy Gilmore, me and my cousin that I already mentioned, we watched Adam Sandler movies on repeat. Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore. So that's insane.
Yeah, well, it's just amazing that even back in the 90s, things were happening with computers and film that were just changing how movies got made. Oddly enough, they also worked on the pilot for the X-Men animated series, like Pride of the X-Men. They did the
Oh,
opening titles for that, but I guess it never really released. So, uh,
interesting. Yeah, because I think so. Toei did the Pride of the X-Men, and then I believe whatever they did was just just copy and paste of the animation they had in the episode. Do you do
well,
you do you happen to remember what the Pride of the X-Men
no, they
intro
did
looked
that
like?
before I got there.
Oh,
That was
gotcha.
actually before I even got to college, but I
Yeah.
remember there being posters on the wall, and and they would do stuff for commercials and opening titles,
Hmm.
and you see what studios make a movie, they do their
Yeah.
logos and stuff. But they also, because they were owned in part by a Japanese uh, pachinko machine manufacturer,
Hmm.
and I think they saw Nintendo, which had come from making playing cards originally, and had grown into this monolithic, great computer games company. And they're like, why can't we should be able to do that, you know? And so they kind of asked that studio to make a video game, and it was a fighting game, believe it or not. So it's just kind of a weird way that the universe works its magic around things. It was a thing called exotic fighters. And I just want to be very clear on that word, exotic. There's probably a market for the other things you might have heard, but that's not what I was working on. Yeah,
Exotic fighter. Yeah, a lot is
exotic
coming up right
fighters.
now. Video game. Let's see. All right, so you worked on it.
So we worked on it. It was supposed to be. It was they were really great at making 3D graphics. They were great at animating characters and stuff, and they thought it would be kind of not all that big of a leap to create a video game using
Hmm.
their immense creative talents. Um, it had a couple of things going against it from the start, but it was made for PCs, which is
Okay.
not really your ideal fighting game platform. And it was meant to be networked, like you'd play it over a LAN. And so you were supposed to be able to compete against other people on a local area network, which really at the time, the lag and stuff for that kind of a thing, you're just not going to get the kind of frame accurate
Yeah.
results that you need for a fighting game. So with all the and we also motion captured all of the animation. So we had these performance artists, stuntmen type people
That's so cool,
up in a
man.
loft, and we had them all hooked up with those little white balls and their unitards. And I help pick and set up the motion capture rigs, and the balls would they do their moves. I think we had one of the martial artists from the Power Rangers.
Oh,
I don't remember which Power Ranger he was. Maybe the green one, but it's a little fuzzy at this point.
yeah, Jason
But
David Frank, who just passed recently. I
yeah,
don't know if you saw the news on that.
I did see the news on
Yeah,
that. I
yeah,
didn't, I only got to meet his stunt double if it really was the Green
yeah,
Ranger. But that guy could move
yeah.
the
I
stunt
believe
man.
it. I believe it, man.
But we could just never get it all to kind of come together. But I did know at that point that because I was technological, and so I got to do all this stuff because I knew things, and it was not in when it was sort of more of the film world. It was like, well, wait your turn, or this is not, it was just a little slower to break through. But this was one of those things where if you knew something, you could do it if you had the knowledge
Mhm.
and the energy and the willpower to just go do it. You could do it, and it felt like the early days of filmmaking where nobody knew what they were doing. So
Yeah.
they didn't know how to tell a story on film. They didn't know how to edit things together to make things follow one another. And so you were writing the rules, and in that time, it felt like we were still writing the rules,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that
Well,
just
absolutely.
attracted me to that thing like a moth to a flame. So
So, so where did you? So I love this whole idea of pioneering, especially in like the '90s with video games, and it really was uncharted territories. I mean, it's certainly not the market that it is today. I'm curious, where did you make the leap from there, from from doing exotic fighting to going to Activision?
So when it became kind of clear that that game was not happening, I started looking at options, and they were gonna basically get rid of that division. And so I kind of volunteered to be part of the wave of cuts of that division. And my wife was going in medical residency. She's a obstetric and gynecologist, so she's was in her medical residency at Harbor UCLA at the time, and
Hmm.
through that she had a connection with another resident who rode bikes with a guy who worked at Activision's, I don't know, finance and accounting department or something. But
Okay.
he told me who to get, he kind of told me who to send my resume to and talk to. and kind of made sure that it got noticed. And so that was really fun, kind of cool that he would do that for me. And
It's
I
so
got,
funny. That's how I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's like
that's okay.
how jobs used to work. That like
Hmm.
you would see, oh, do you know someone? It's like, yeah, I know someone who works in accounting, even though you're applying for an editorial job and stuff like that. And you just get those kind of like that bit of information through there. The other thing I wanted to mention was I used to work at HarperCollins as a marketing and editor, and we did Jason Schreier's book from Kotaku called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels.
Okay.
And a
Yeah.
lot of people at home probably don't know this, but video games, just because they go into development doesn't mean they're going to be finished or they'll get done. A
Mm-mm.
lot of them just implode during production, and you have a wave of people who are left unemployed. So it's interesting you said that that's what happened to you and you volunteered.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's amazing that any of them get done just with some of the challenges involved. But yeah, there's sometimes just some false starts.
Yeah.
But just the stuff that I got to do left me with a lot of valuable knowledge and experience. And so between that and and my experience at USC, I was kind really welcomed at Activision, and really it was funny. My the you do a whole day of interviews, and at the end of the day, they take you up. Back then, Activision had kind of recently come out of bankruptcy a few years before,
Mhm.
so they'd gone from making those cartridges for the Atari to having some trouble. And they were making like other software products like word processors and stuff,
Yeah.
and then so they'd come out of it. And now they were legitimately trying to conquer the world of video games again, and so they were in growth mode. But at the end of the day, of all these interviews I got passed from, department to department of groups of video game uh, teams, because there's different platforms there. I met with the Bobby Kotick, and then the president of the company wanted to meet every single applicant at that time was Howard Shore, who had worked in Howard Marks. I'm sorry, I said Howard Shore. He's a composer. Howard Marks, but he had come from Hollywood, and so he kind of he knew my former bosses at Metrolight, and so he kind of did this. Oh, okay. So, do you know the owners of Metrolight? I'm like, yeah, this is Jim and Dobby. And he's like, okay, well, if I call them, I know them. If I call them, will they say nice things about you? I'm like, yeah, I think so. Although I probably didn't get on their radar a ton. So, so that was my entry into Activision, and they hired me into the console division, which was working on a couple, like two games at the time. One was
Mhm.
Apocalypse, it was a Bruce Willis vehicle, and
Okay.
I don't now it
Wait,
doesn't get remembered a lot, but it
nice.
had the singer Poe as one of the boss characters. It was kind of this
I
Hollywood creation.
vaguely remember this. It's
Well,
a shooter game, right?
yeah, it's like a third person shooter game, and the cool thing that came out of that is
Oh,
we
here it
established
is.
a relationship with the company that had become Neversoft,
Hmm.
and that was really important down the line. But I was on Pitfall 3D,
Hmm.
so they were kind of reviving some of the old Activision titles and bringing, kind of updating them for the new wave of consoles that were coming out. And so I was working on the original PlayStation, PSX, and we're trying to figure out a way to adapt what was a 2D kind of side-scrolling experience
Hmm.
to this new 3D technology. And I was brought on as an asset manager, which is not even a commonly used title in video games anymore. I'm sure they exist in some format or another, but essentially I was wrangling all these files and stuff. But I started I started quickly kind of functioning as an assistant to the producer and kind of doing anything that he needed done. I was like signing up for it. And so at one point, I actually even helped design the sound system for Pitfall 3D.
Oh wow, man.
And like we were writing the rules,
Hmm.
I had this idea that music could be more dynamic than it was. Usually it was canned music bits, and it would either play through the background of an entire level,
Hmm.
or maybe it would switch to another kind of track or whatever at certain key times. I'm like, why can't it just never stop? Why does it have to switch tracks? Why can't it just kind of evolve? And so we came up with this system where we could take different layers of the music and turn them on and off at certain cue points in the level, or if certain types of encounters were happening, and it would change the kind of dynamic character of the music. And I think it's really common to do now, but at the time, this was
You're
like,
pioneering.
I was like, we don't know how to do this. I just know what I think it
What?
should do.
Yeah, in lieu of switching tracks, you just have something that's like self-sufficient and contained and going on repeat there. That's so
Yeah.
that's incredible, man. And so wait, so you were assisting the producer, so you were the asset manager, which the name kind of makes sense. You're wrangling in all the files. You're assisting the producer. What does a video game producer do? Like, what's the general scope, at least in the context
Right.
of what we're going to talk about with Mutant Academy?
Yeah, I think that's probably that's a good thing to establish up front. So, yeah, says, why are you talking to this guy? So producers, kind of at the core of what they do, is they are the product manager and budget keeper, and um, they run the schedules and the budgets. They coordinate with outside contractors. They find people to do the music if it's done outside. They find people to do the cutscenes if they're done outside. They work with the developer. So often, there in those days, especially, there was some internal development, but there was also external development, which you have standalone developers. So that's the difference between publishing and developers. Is a publisher is sort of on the top, where they finance the thing. They are responsible for distribution, retail distribution. In those times, it was still very much physical in the stores.
Yeah.
And so that was a big part of your business: is can you move, manufacture, and distribute to all the stores the product, and then developer. If they were internal, they worked as a team inside the development studio for the publisher, but there was also developers who had their own standalone companies outside, and you would seek them out and find a good fit for projects, bid them out, and then work with them to develop this product that you've kind of defined somewhere as a product, what you'd like to do, what kind of timing, what kind of budget you have for it, and then try to work with them to see that through.
Okay.
And then there was also another relationship that was not this type, where you would find a developer who has already developed something and then go acquire the rights to distribute that product. And so that would happen sometimes too, where there would already be, and I think this happened, with Quake. We didn't say, hey, go make Quake. We just said, hey, we know you make something that we'd like to be, involved in putting out there, and we've got great marketing, and we've got great distribution, and we've got all these support, functions
As a
that'll help
publisher,
you
you're
get
like,
that out.
yeah, as the publisher, like this is what we're going to do to make sure that we can like move the game. So wait, with Marvel, we've spoken with some people from Activision before. Remind me, did Marvel and Activision already have a relationship, or did you guys come in and were part of like people who were like, we can do this game, we want to do this game, and this is what we can offer you?
Well, technically, Activision had made a Marvel game before. I think in 1986 they had released a Howard the Duck game,
Yeah,
but I
fair enough.
don't think that was part of the package that I was working with. So, like Activision, Marvel too kind of ran into some business problems in the 90s, and
Oh
so they had
yeah.
restructured.
Yeah.
And coming out of the restructuring, a lot of the rights to their titles had been licensed out to various entities, and I think Activision had picked up X-Men and Blade, Spider-Man, and I want to say Deadpool. Although
Yeah.
I don't remember one of those games being made while I was there, but I know eventually it did.
Yeah.
And I know he
Deadpool
showed
came
up
back
in some
later.
games.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's
And
interesting.
so, sometime in the late 90s, they had gotten the licenses to those titles, and they had started development of some products based on those licenses. And I know it seems hard to imagine a time when Marvel wasn't very hot, but that was a time when Marvel was very
No,
cold.
it was not. The comic books scene was floundering. You were
Mhm.
lucky to get anything out there. And that's why you were able to get collaborations like Marvel versus Capcom, because Marvel
Hmm.
wasn't what it is today. You could have those kind of, you build those relationships. So,
Right.
but the X-Men movie was coming down the pipeline. So I'm curious, how did Mutant Academy sort of come out? Like, how did it start getting born? Like, was it, I guess I'm trying to formulate my question here. Was it something you guys conceived, or was it something Marvel was in the market for since they had this video game coming out, or was it Fox who was doing that?
No, in fact, so the birth of X-Men Mutant Academy was actually very sort of start and stop for a while. So it was conceived that, okay, there's a fighting game market, and we know that, we can pretty much know that there's an audience for that on consoles, and it was actually kind of big. They had, Tekken and Soul Blade, and there were some rather, popular fighting games, but they were
Mhm.
their own IP. And we're thinking, as a company, putting the X-Men, a recognizable, had name recognition, it had great characters in who, were associated with battle, and so this would be a great combination. So they had been embarking on creating an X-Men fighting game since before I joined
Oh
the
wow.
project. Yeah. So the original producer on that project got hired away by, I want to say, Universal Interactive,
Hmm.
and so and it had been being made by a company in London called, I think, Cyrox. And I actually worked with Cyrox on Asteroids 3D and Asteroids Game Boy Color. And so I knew those guys. And so and I'd worked with them. And so they kind of, as I was coming off of another project, asked me to take a look at this one. And so I made a bunch of trips over to London and was kind of seeing the progress. And I was kind of becoming more and more convinced that this was not going to happen. It just, it didn't feel like the technology was coming along. That,
Yeah.
fighting games are so ultra specific in the kind of performance you need to have,
Yeah.
and I didn't really feel like they had a total grasp of the property.
Mm,
And so I think we just at some point decided, especially I think we got wind that a movie release was forthcoming. We weren't
yeah.
affiliated with the movie at that point, but we got kind of this idea that, wouldn't it be nice to kind of ride that wave? And so we parted ways with the original developer and had been working with another developer called Paradox. And Paradox was local to the LA area. So even though nothing in LA is easy to get to, it was a lot easier to get to than London from
Yeah.
LA. And so
I
I
don't know,
could,
man. A 5 hour, well, 5 hour flight from New York, but yeah, man, I've been stuck in some LA traffic in the past. But anyways, continue. Sorry.
yeah. Well, it wasn't quite as bad as it was back then,
Mhm.
and you could kind of time it. But
Mhm.
they had worked on a game called Thrill Kill. If you remember this game, it kind of was very edgy for its time. I want to say it was a Take-Two game, and it had like fighting dwarves and guys on stilts and BDSM kind of dressed people and dominatrix characters. And it at some point garnered enough negative publicity that the publisher kind of decided they weren't going to release that, and that game was all but done. And so that
Wow.
really, I think, was kind of a big blow to Paradox. But Activision kind of came in at that point and said, "Well, you got this fighting game engine that really is pretty performant, and we know you can make a good fighting game. We've picked up the rights to Wu-Tang Clan, a fighting game by Wu-Tang Clan." And so they did this game called Wu-Tang Shaolin Style,
Yeah.
and I tangentially worked on that project. The producer of that game needed to do his interstitial cut scenes, and he didn't know, he had no idea where to go with it. But he had heard that I went to film school, and he thought that qualified me as well as anyone to write it. And I said, I'll do anything. I
Just name
love
it.
I love the creative process. And so I mean, I had done screenwriting for so I wrote the cinematic script for that, and it was very tongue in cheek and referential to kung fu movies and stuff. And at least I think the biggest deal there was just to get the guys from Wu Tang Clan to kind of be enthusiastic about it, because they were known to be a little hard to nail down in terms of what they would agree to.
I haven't thought about them until this very interview right now. Like, but yeah, they had their minute, and I'm sure they were impossible to
They were
nail down.
huge,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
there were so many of them too. But and anyway, so after that, coming off of that, the timing kind of worked out where we're like, okay, if we shift the X-Men project to them, maybe we can get kind of some momentum because they already have the engine. We know it. You know, they've released games on this engine. We know it's performant. We know that they get it, and we know that we have a great working relationship with these guys. Only problem was now we didn't have a lot of time. You know,
yeah.
we were really short on time in order to get this game out because we really, for financial reasons and for cultural reasons and all that, really wanted to make sure that it kind of lined up with when the movie would be coming out. And
Right.
I think that's when we started kind of getting the pieces together, we reached out to Fox just to kind of see if there was any interest in kind of working together on, because I don't think the other thing that's really hard to remember is there hadn't been a successful comic book movie that had made any cultural impact. I mean, we had Blade, but I don't even think most of the people who had liked watching Blade necessarily
Yeah.
were aware that it was a comic book movie or had ever read the comic books. Or
Right.
so really,
We're coming off the heels of like Batman and Robin, which I love. I do love that movie for what it is, a Joel Schumacher. But with the exception of like Batman with Michael Keaton and
yeah.
Superman, I mean, superhero movies
I,
were
sh-
like
yeah. I
no,
shouldn't have said
no good.
superhero. I should have said Marvel superhero
Oh,
movie.
Marvel, yeah, yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah, Marvel had nothing. We've talked about this before in the podcast. I mean, the X-Men movie was a pioneer for modern, superhero genre. Uh,
yeah.
and the only thing we had before with the X-Men or Marvel, they did a Generation X TV movie pilot, which we
Hmm.
love here, and we've had many of the actors, but it just did not resonate at all.
No, and it was always considered beneath the audience. You know, it was B movie stuff. You
Yeah,
know, I know the Batman stuff did actually kind of legitimize it to a degree, but even they didn't take it horribly seriously.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
X Men was really the first modern superhero movie, and certainly for Marvel was a huge turning point.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think Fox, like Activision, had acquired a group of their licenses,
Yep.
and so this was new for them, and they were really invested in making it a success. And so this magical moment in time where corporate entities that would normally kind of be really kind of, oh, this is mine, and this,
Mm.
and if you want to do a deal with us, let's make it hard and get the lawyers involved for 6 months. This went pretty smoothly and fast considering, and they were so gracious. And I remember taking my development PlayStation over to the Fox Studios and demoing the game for them,
Hmm.
and just they were really kind and awesome, and they provided me uh, production drawings, and artwork and movie
Hmm.
stills, and then invited me up to the set. They were filming outside in Toronto, and so I got to
Wow.
tour and kind of get reference shots and stuff for the movie sets, and it really allowed me to kind of figure out how we could incorporate that vibe and make sure that our game, which was definitely comic book first,
Yeah. Yeah.
could still legitimately feel like these were the same world.
Okay, wait. What was the vibe like on set though? I mean, you're on the set of the first original X-Men film. Did you see Famke? Was Famke there?
So they made sure that I showed up at a time where they were not filming, any of the primary actors.
Okay,
And it was pretty empty and shut down at the time. So they
fair
gave me
enough.
these kind of like disposable booties that I had to
Yep.
wear everywhere because you couldn't damage any of the surfaces, and you're
Oh,
like very
interesting.
careful about touching things because the paint job that they did was made to look like metallic, but it was obviously not, and so you really couldn't get fingerprints on anything, and so you had to be super super careful what you did, but it was still amazing, and it still was like brought the whole world to life. And you can, if you look up high enough, you can see the end of the room, and then you're looking into a
Yeah.
soundstage. But um, just being in that environment, you could really tell that they'd put a lot of love and care into it, and that
Hmm.
they really wanted this to feel like a real world. And so I was like, okay, well, we got something to live up to then.
Yeah, yeah.
And it
No,
really encouraged me to know that we were hitching our star kind of to the right place.
well, Jay, it's so funny that you're saying that because one of the things that I have to tell you, and I've marinated on Mutant Academy for years, was why was it so beloved? Why was it a vibe? Why was it the specific moment? And I think you can tell that there is a lot of TLC within this game, and you do areas, you do stages like the blue area of the moon. You have costumes like the Dark Phoenix costume and stuff like
Mhm.
that. I mean, you can tell the TLC. The fact that you went to Toronto and saw the actual sets and you were like, damn, I have to capture this, but like in my game that's comic book first. That's no easy task. You know what I mean? And you captured it pretty well. You and the entire team captured it very well.
Well, it was not so. A lot of games come out and they just slap a license
Yeah.
on to something. Like they had this old Mario Brothers knockoff, and they just say, oh, we'll
Yeah.
just make whatever with it.
Yeah.
We approached this as fans of the comic book, especially
Hmm.
Todd.
Yeah.
Todd was my right hand man, and we just have long conversations
Hmm.
about what should be in it, what should doesn't make sense to be in it.
Hmm.
Getting the right balance of characters and environments, and just how much it wasn't fan service as much as this is what we wanted to see. That's a location we wanted a video game to go to, and didn't understand why no one had ever explored that before, and what kind of captured our imaginations and seemed epic about that world. And so maybe that has been something that resonates, is you can maybe tell that there's a lot of love for the property in it, and it's
Yeah.
not just slapped on there.
Well, so I have a question for you. So, in terms of character, I can understand stages wherever you go, but character selections, you do have the core movie cast. So, were you aware of who was going to be in the movie, and that's why you had the characters
I
set
think
like that?
so. Eventually, we became aware of it
Yeah.
as the movie got closer, and to be honest, some of it just naturally, serendipitously crossed over, because that's
Yeah.
just who the big
Wolverine,
characters are,
Cyclops.
and
Yeah.
why would they not be in the movie?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Exactly.
then I think there were probably a couple of adjustments. Obviously, we have Beast in our
Yeah.
game, and that was done purely for game purposes and
Oh,
comic book
really?
purposes. He wasn't going to be in the movie,
Yeah. Well, who
so
would want that sociopath in the movie? Jay,
well,
you may not know this, but on the podcast, we hate Hank McCoy here.
oh, you do. Oh, you
Yeah.
should have told me that before. Now I'm gonna have to adjust my favorite character.
No,
All right.
that's fair. We have plenty of people who've come out and said how much they love Beast. It's just a running gag here. But anyways, yeah.
Well, uh, uh, it just remembered, though, because of our association with Fox, Todd and I got to go out to New York City for the premiere of that movie.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, well, there was two premieres. There's a West Coast and East Coast premiere. We
yeah.
went to the first one on the East Coast, and because the big climax happens on the Statue of Liberty,
Liberty, yeah.
they did a screening with just tons of luminaries at Ellis Island. And so
Yeah,
we all
yeah.
piled into these ferries and made our way across the river to Ellis Island, out and just set up our game consoles and demoed the game to everybody who came by. And so I ran into Rebecca Romaine Stamos, who, well, that was her
I
name at
hate
the
that.
time, and
Yeah. Rebecca Romano.
I'm 6'5".
Yeah.
She's a very tall woman, and
Wow, she looks gorgeous. Her mystique, my God, talk about like just groundbreaking. Like
yeah, I mean,
everyone loved her. I mean, there is hope she will return in Secret Wars in the MCU. But how was she? Like, did she play the game?
I believe that people politely played the game, but I don't think very many of the stars were that big of a game player at the time.
Mm.
Um, some people walk by and politely, kind of spend a couple of minutes, but they had lots of people to go meet at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't get anywhere near Patrick Stewart. He kind of had his own little area. But it was. I did ride the ferry back with Stan Lee,
Oh
and
man, how was he?
that
How was it
was,
seeing that?
oh my gosh, it was so cool because I just had my little kind of all my equipment back, and um, I took my version of the game.
Mhm.
If you look, I don't know if I can hold this up. Oh,
Oh,
it's
it's not
gonna
gonna be
it's,
it.
it's
Yeah,
there. So
yeah.
you can see there's my ticket
Oh, your
to the
ticket's
premiere,
there. Oh
and
man,
right
that's
down
awesome.
here I had Stan Lee sign my game.
Dude, that is so awesome. What is that?
And he was so gracious, and he was just like ebullient, and you just tell that he just was having the time of his life, and he loved seeing the stuff that he had created get the love and recognition that it really deserved.
You're the second person telling me that. So there was this long-standing, I don't want to say rumor, but just impression within the fan community that Stan was kind of like a meh, like, get off my lawn kind of personality. But we had Margaret Lesh on the podcast who, created Fox Kids and was a big TV executive in the 90s. And she was like, Stan just was happy to do what he was told. And she's here like, I don't understand these rumors online or this impression that people got. Stan was just happy to see all of the characters he created
Yeah.
come to life and have a new generation discover. So verbatim what you said is what she said. And she was very close with Stan.
And I don't have any inside information, but I
Mm.
understand there was a period of time where maybe he was on the outside, and
Yeah.
all his creations were being controlled by other companies or people, and he would. But by the time I worked on this project, he had been brought on as the emeritus guy that was the Godfather, and he was involved in all sorts of stuff, and including making cameos in the movies, which became this like
Okay.
Hitchcockian kind of tradition where he had to be in it.
Yeah.
And so
It was a
you
hotbed
know
bender for the first one.
I could see him maybe being a little sour if that was in fact true, that he had been
Mm.
pushed to the side for a while. But by
It's
the
a very good
time I
point.
met him, there was definitely an appreciation shown to him, and I think you just could tell that this was such an important part of his life, and he just was so proud of his children. You
So
know.
how far in advance wait, let me back up here. So how long did you have to make the game? What was the official timeline for the game?
Well, after I took it over, I think we had something like 8 months, which is ridiculous.
That's nothing. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like that's no time at all.
And
And you
so, if there's some shortcomings to the game, I would like to just point out that what we did with that time was really cool.
Yeah.
And I think you would see in X-Men 2 that some of the stuff that got left on the cutting room floor kind of started to make it in.
Yeah.
But we were just really concerned that the core of the game experience had to be really solid, because
Yeah.
8 months is not a ton of time. So great. Paradox had this great engine. They had a lot of
The
experience.
thrill kill engine, right? That's what
Yes,
okay.
the Shaolin, that engine
Mhm.
had been. We modified it for this game
Yeah.
because we knew that there was sort of an expectation for what an X-Men game could and should be. And the prior game that we had kind of shut down was trying to be more of a Soul Blade kind of thing, was just full true 3D, cameras rotating all over the place, characters are kind of rendered in that full 3D way and are
I
moving all over the
which characters did you have for that one? I'm just curious. Or was it just like shots of Wolverine? Were they just beta?
I know we had Wolverine, I know we had Cyclops, and I think we had Apocalypse.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
Well, so
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact reasons, but it did not make sense for us to incorporate him into Mutant Academy.
Yeah.
It just was a little outside of the core,
Yeah.
and especially at that time when nothing, he there hadn't been a movie where he had been
No.
a
He was
major plot
larger.
point or anything.
Were there any characters that you had wanted to include but just didn't have a chance to
So
get
we
them
had
in?
put some hardcore effort into seeing if we could incorporate Marrow.
Oh,
We
yes. And
got,
she's coming off of Marvel versus Capcom. Very,
yeah.
very, very popular at the time.
I think we even maybe had a preliminary model for her.
Yeah.
It was just, again, not enough, I think, core of what we needed to accomplish. And and that may have been one of the characters that got swapped out for one that we knew was going to be in the movie.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think we kind of picked well to begin with. I think we kind of knew what
Yeah.
was, especially for the first X-Men game that Activision's going to put out. We kind of knew and had settled upon a really core group of characters that balanced really well from a game standpoint, because it wasn't just, hey, what are the popular characters, but which ones make sense to go up against each other and will naturally have different playing styles that will, balance against each other.
And were you guys inspired at all by the Marvel versus Capcom series, which had come out a couple years
Yeah,
early? I mean, they were,
absolutely. It set the gold standard,
yeah,
really, for not only, I mean, probably arcade fighting games, because it just, you had kind of two camps, and there was these new 3D fighters, but they kind of felt slower and more strategic, and the Capcom thing was just all action. It's
yeah,
just all
yeah.
fast and it's all snappy, and because you got rid because it's in 2D, they can just do things at the frame rate of the technology of the time that 3D just couldn't pull off, and it just felt so responsive and good. And
Yeah.
we were very cognizant of that, and also it just was so colorful and just true to the comic kind of vibe. There's a reason why they're wearing blue and yellow uniforms in that era, is because they really pop off the page.
That is one of the things we've talked about with this game is just the coloring for it and how it just pops. I mean, even right here and even in your background, I mean, you can just see it. It just like pops on the screen. I mean, guys at home, like PS1, Papa John's playing this game with those colors just like glowing off the screen. It was a total vibe, you know?
Yeah, well, and in that era, there were a lot of games that kind of felt very Nine Inch Nails, dirty, grungy
Yeah.
kind of. This was definitely an era where sometimes it got really dark,
Yeah.
and just that was not the vibe that we thought was really appropriate for an X-Men game at that time. So
Well, speaking about a little bit more grungy though, you were able to get in the movie costume skins, as like unlockables. How far in advance were you able to get those? I mean, you have 8 months, it is a time crunch. Is it a situation where you just built the character and you can just reskin it? I mean, how does that work?
so we did have a base character, and then you'll notice that the Wolverine in the movie Wolverine in Mutant Academy is not Hugh Jackman's body, right? It's the comic book Wolverine's body,
Yeah.
who's impossibly blocky,
Yeah.
and he's a spark plug, and um, so it's called reskinning. It wasn't as simple as just painting a new skin on them. In
Yeah.
many cases, you had to alter some of the geometry on the models, but you had a pretty good base model to work with. So in many cases, you didn't have to start from scratch
Yeah.
for the characters. And we got a hold of the pre-production art maybe 5 months out from release. So we had sketches of from the costume designer, and we kind of had
Okay.
some turnarounds. They do costume tests with the actors in them, and they do them at the different angles. And I think we had some of those. And for all I know, I think some of those things are in the game, because we have unlockables where there's this whole Cerebro that you can go in and look through old comics, or you can look at some of the movie trailers in there, and there's some movie stills and production stills.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of that we
100%.
just said, hey, I'm a fanboy about this stuff. I could see other people being real interested in this. Can we put this in there? And they were really cool about it.
And this is a time before YouTube. So the fact that you're playing this video game and you have the trailer for X-Men in it, I mean, again, it wasn't something that was readily available. You would see a trailer in the movie theater only, and it was gone forever. That's it. So the
Yeah.
fact that it was right there on the PS1 was so good. I have to ask, because you mentioned Rebecca Romaine Stamos, you see her, and she politely played the game. Did she see the skin for movie Mystique? Because that is like the breakaway star. I mean, you guys nailed that. She looks so good in there.
Yeah, well, the good news is comic book characters are basically drawn naked already in a lot of cases.
Fair
So we
enough.
had plausible deniability about, to the ESRB. That's just a comic book. She's wearing tights.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think maybe because of how awesome that costume was, for all I know, the artist put extra care into it. Because yeah, there was detail in there that I didn't know you could get on a PlayStation
Yeah.
at the time, and so yeah, it did look good.
So
Maybe that one worked better than the comic book one in that particular character's instance.
so What so you have 8 months, and there was so much you guys had to accomplish within those 8 months. I mean, you did the cutscenes, for example, which were really, really great. Was there ever planned to have like an overarching story with the cutscenes, or was it just we have 8 months, we gotta get this game out the door, we'll just do these little vignettes that
So I think what was really important, especially with the time we had, but even without that being a restriction, we did really think that it was appropriate that we captured the essence of this universe and not try to tell one specific story. So it was more about the characters than it was about what the characters were doing outside of this battle arena. Because also, we wanted to take them to all these locations that would have been really hard to string together into a cohesive, understandable story. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
jumping from Blue Area to Savage Land, I don't even think continuity wise you could make a case for it, right? So I think it was more important for us to just focus on the characters and what would be their essence. And also with that kind of time, 3D cutscenes are some of the more intensive production things that you
Yeah.
can do. And so really we didn't want to sign up for something that was going to be unachievable at a level of quality that we were going to be happy with. We had contracted with this company out of St. Petersburg, Russia called Kriat Studios,
Hmm.
which they were just fantastic to work with, and they did really excellent work and turned around things pretty quickly. I think I did the storyboards for all of those. This is again at that point in my life, I was living under my desk, and this was my life, but I was also just all in.
Well, I
And
have to tell you, the storyboards for that are great. You nailed it when you said you captured the essence of the characters. I mean, that is how, I mean, Gambit on an airboat, like Jean, fighting the Brood, Wolverine with the Weapon X, Cyclops, with the Sentinel and like the baby carriage. I mean, those are the essence of the characters, and you got them.
well, I hope you got my little Sergei Eisenstein reference with the baby carriage scene for Battleship Potemkin. That was my
I,
film school nerdiness coming through.
I mean, I know that. I know the reference. I didn't know where it originated from, but now I do, man. But the thing that I'm just noticing, well, just like talking to you right here, is that there was so much love poured into this game. And one of the things that obviously that you just made all of the X-Stands happy and made it seem more official was you brought back a lot of the X-Men animated series voice actors.
Yeah, that was one of the greatest kind of coups that we made on that game, and that there's a lot of stuff that's done in LA. There's actors, you trip over actors just walking around the block, right? But
Yeah.
we really wanted something that would tie our product to the past and the future of
Yeah.
X-Men and really make it very comfortable experience to someone who already loved that property, loved that comic. And we went to the actual production company that had done the original 90s era cartoon animated series, and their voice acting producer director just kind of had connections to all these guys, and so it was kind of a package deal for the people we could get. I just remember a couple of people not being available
Yeah, like Cal
on our
Dodd.
schedule. Yeah.
Cal Dodd, unfortunately. But you had Allison Smith, who did Storm. You had Tony Daniel, who was the second voice of Gambit. You had David Hemblin, who was Magneto. You had Jennifer Dale, who was Mystique. Doc Franks, who was Sabretooth. And George Buza, who was obviously Beast. And Catherine Disher as Jean Grey. I mean, I got to tell you, bravo on that. And, at the time, there wasn't like an IMDb page where you can confirm that. And again, I was a
Mhm.
teenager, so I'm not very bright, but I'm like, I think that sounds like Gene from the animated series. You weren't quite sure, and it just sounded so good, man.
Well, yeah, we just thought that that was one of the important things to kind of give that kind of seal of authenticity. And so we're really glad that we could do that and that was available. And my associate producer, Gene Bong, went up to Toronto for a couple of days and sat in their recording studio with them and just you know she's such a pro though. She'd done this with them so many times
Yeah.
that they just fell right back into those characters, and it was pretty easy a pretty easy process to get that.
Was Rogue ever going to be considered for the game at one point? Do you remember? I know I'm asking you for something that happened like 30 years ago, but was she ever considered? And I only ask because we're big friends. We're friends with Lenore Zan, who does the voice of Rogue for the animated series.
So I guarantee she was on the short list at one point, and I think, like I was saying earlier, we Todd Jefferson and I would have a ton of just arguments about, okay, well, what about this and what about that character and why not? And we're just trying to figure out how to balance what would they be able to do in a fighting game,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of what would their powers look like. And some of their powers are a little harder to depict, in a way, and some of them just kind of were too samey or didn't feel like something that I'd want to play. And
Yeah.
so she just, we couldn't make she didn't make the cut. It's not that we didn't want a rogue.
Yeah.
And especially with the movie tie-in, it would have made a ton of sense.
Right, but
Um,
Rogue, like Mystique, you have certain hurdles with, and we saw this even with X-Men Legends at one point. How do you replicate Rogue's power? I mean, she can punch, she can fly, but her main power is absorbing, and like,
right. And
Mystique being, Mystique, I don't believe shapeshifts in the game, and she instead has her big old gun.
no, yeah. So that was the hard thing with Mystique is, her kind of signature power doesn't translate great to this style of fighting game. So we kind of had to lean on her assassin background, or her access to the high tech weaponry to give her something. But it also made her a great range fighter,
Yeah.
and kind of gave her a slot in the lineup that made sense for a game like this.
So, what were some of the challenges with making the game when you look back on it? Was there something in particular that you were like, damn, like we thought this game wasn't going to make it because of this hurdle?
Well, I mean, so first of all, just the whole transitioning from having worked on, there had been a game that was in production, and now we've
Yeah.
got 8 months left to really get this thing done. That was a huge hurdle in and of itself, and so it was kind of no small miracle to be able to turn on a dime like that and sort of put this together. Um, I don't remember anything. I mean, it was all a blur because it just was kind of this momentum. It was like, this is happening. We're doing it. It
Yeah.
was it was running downhill as fast as we could. And so I think, the process of getting a game approved at that time was especially nerve wracking. Sony had to manufacture all the master discs, and you had to kind of submit a gold master to them, and you'd be up all night in the mastering room Activision had on the studio floor, and trying to get the machine to put out the required number of 8 identical discs or whatever. You had to turn in a whole bunch of them, and then they'd come back with this laundry list of things that you had to change. They had this long kind of list of requirements for how menus work, to how things, how long things can take, to how you have to kind of present information and
Interesting. I never
save
thought about it like
games.
that.
Oh yeah, they're like, oh well, you don't get the right message when you pull out the save game cartridge in the middle of it saying please wait saving or whatever, and you're like, okay. So they really had gone through a lot of permutations of all the things that someone could do that could break things, and they wanted you to not allow them to do that. So, that was probably the hardest part of the whole ride, to be honest. And I flew that game up to Sony personally,
Really?
up in Redwood, California, and the masters off myself. I think we were under such a tight time crunch, and I was like, I am not leaving this up to a courier
No.
or anyone else. I'm gonna walk this into the building, and if they got questions, I'm right here.
Wow. So what was it like delivering the game and the final product and all that stuff?
I was probably sleepwalking at that time. I barely remember it. I remember, I think, being a little underwhelmed by the building I was in. I was like, this
Oh.
is Sony. Looks just like an office building to me. Okay. But, it's just one of the things, and that's the kind of like, as a producer, you're ultimately responsible for getting that thing out the door.
Yeah, your name's on this.
Yeah,
Wait.
and the company's name's on it, and your responsibility is to just to do right by the game itself, and by the company, essentially the financial backer, right? So
So
You know,
Jay, is Beast your favorite X-Man? Was that going to be your answer?
that was going to be my answer because I didn't want to give, the standard, oh, Wolverine's the baddest ass guy ever. He's awesome. I like Beast because he's this awesome mix of intellect and raw acrobatic power.
Yeah.
And he's got so many side talents. And I guess I like this Renaissance man kind of vibe he's got.
And to be
Um,
clear, in the 90s, he was that Renaissance man,
yeah.
and he was out finding a cure for the legacy virus and all the stuff. It's modern era Beast that's
Well,
a raging
yeah.
sociopath.
The comics have retconned a couple of the characters over time in ways that I wouldn't necessarily have agreed to do, but I understand that you've got to get new, fresh stories and give the characters room to grow. But I'm sort of solid '90s era Beast
I
guy.
mean, same,
He
man.
he's even a pilot. I mean, come on,
He
that
could
guy
do
can do
everything.
anything.
So, was he your favorite character to sort of help bring to the game, and especially you have George, who's there, who's the OG voice actor? Was he your favorite one to sort of create with the team?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, no, actually, um, Toad ended up being the
Oh, of
guy.
course. Of course. Thank you for saying that. Toad gets so much shit, out there. Like we had someone on recently who was here like, who would have ever thought they would make a Toad figure? It's like Toad is so great. Yes, I love that.
Yeah, he was. I mean, just from a fighting standpoint,
Yeah.
he just it is so amazing because he just moved around in a way that was so animal like, but and then with the tongue attacks, he could just swipe under your feet and knock.
Yeah.
He was almost overpowered, I would say, but he was so fun. And he was
Yeah.
just having he wasn't like, yeah, I'm gonna kick your butt. Like, he was just having a good time, and just that the character just really was just awesome. It came out well, and so that was kind of the most fun I had with any of those characters.
What
Um,
about the least favorite character to who gave you like the most trouble with creating them?
well, at one point, I think Jean Grey and Phoenix had a
No.
sash. She had a sash that was
Yes.
really friggin' hard, and so I think you'll notice she doesn't have that anymore.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, but it would, it had to. She was flying, and so it
Yeah.
had to kind of behave
Move.
like it had physics on it, and it was just always kind of bugging out or something. And so it was that one was tough. I didn't have any problem with her character, although as a floating character, it's really hard to animate that in a way that is convincing.
Hmm.
Instead of just kind of hovering, that it has to kind of flow with the moves and feel like she's impelling instead of just kind of there. And so that was hard because that's not a natural thing to model, motion after. And so you want it to be dynamic because it's a fighting game. But, I think we went around the block a couple of times trying to get her right.
So we are huge Jean Grey fans here at the podcast, and we have to ask this very meticulous question. She is wearing her Phoenix costume,
Yeah.
not her 90s, traditional costume. What was it? I can understand why you would go with Phoenix, but I want to hear from you guys.
Okay.
Do you remember why Phoenix and not normal 90s?
So, because video games are a very, the visual medium, I know comic books are too, but they can kind of imply things happening through the storytelling that we just have to
Hmm.
do in real time. And so, something that's just got psychokinetic powers, there's only so much we could do, and we wanted to kind of expand her repertoire uh, uh, of abilities, and we really thought that that costume just really is awesome.
Yeah,
So
it is. I mean, it's
I mean,
iconic.
I kind of just kept going, hey, can we just do this costume? And so, but also just the kind of bring in that kind of Phoenix Force, fire powers to the fighting attacks. Just was kind of a really good fit for the game.
Yeah, and you were able to get Dark Phoenix out of that really easily. Hopefully, it's just a change of the palette, and she looked great. I mean, I think that set the bar for all of her appearances in fighting games later on.
Okay, yeah. Well, like I said, nobody ever talks to me about this stuff, but maybe.
We're here to tell you everything. So Beast and Gambit didn't have movie counterparts. Obviously, I think
Hmm.
Beast at one point was supposed to be in the movie, but obviously didn't make
He's
it.
a hard guy to pull off on the budget they had.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how did you guys pull off the movie adaptations of them? Did you have to get any permission from Fox or Marvel, or did you have free reign to just?
Well, so we already had the designs for the other characters,
Mhm,
and they kind of it's a uniform, right? So
mhm.
they kind of all had a vibe to them, and so I think we created some mock-up drawings and went through an approval process with Fox, and they'd tell us, yeah, that's close, but you need to change the collar here or the color
Yeah.
here. This is, this color is not usable or
Mhm,
whatever. And there'd be
yeah.
a little back and forth, but eventually we'd get to a design that they were happy with. And, at that point, you know, it was, it was
It was
pretty
just
easy.
yeah. You guys also had, I think I never played the Game Boy exclusive, but you guys had Pyro and Apocalypse there. Were they ever slotted to appear in the main console?
No, so I think Apocalypse might have been sort of, us
Yeah.
missing him from, that original version of the game and just really liking the character. I didn't do the Game Boy game, so I
Yeah.
can't answer specifically why Pyro's in there, but it may have also been a choice based on kind of his unique abilities.
So the other thing, and I'm pretty sure this was probably just crunch time, but like Toad, Sabretooth, and Mystique didn't really get formal endings. Was that more a byproduct of you have 8 months to
Hmm.
do this entire game, so we can get in what we can, but these three characters we can sort of, do
Yeah,
something
that,
pretty
that was
special.
definitely a schedule thing where if we wanted to do these other characters to the standard that we wanted to get them done to,
Hmm.
there we weren't going to be able to do all of the characters. So we just figured out which ones really um, were the ones that people would most want to see little vignettes for, and make sure they got their due. And
So
I wish we could have gotten them all in. That would have been fun. I could have done some more storyboards under my desk.
I mean, listen, the Mystique ending where she's here, like, oh, great, a statue of you, Magneto. I know exactly where to stick this. Come on.
So yeah, that probably was mine, and I might have been a little punch drunk when I wrote it. But it's like her costume. There's no saying that that's what her intention is with that line.
It
But it
was,
also was kind of character, right on character. I
oh,
love the
yeah,
quips that
absolutely.
these
Yeah,
characters have.
yeah. I mean, listen, one of the things that, again, like, I think, and I'm going to ask you this question, why do you think it resonates? But I guess what I'm trying to say is it's for these little instances that you understood the characters, especially like that. But why do you think the video game, why do you think Mutant Academy still resonates till this day?
Well, I'm gonna have to say that it kind of was this magical time where the X-Men were becoming super relevant,
Yeah.
and so it kind of hit on all these notes of the kind of bringing the comic book fans together with the movie fans. And also I think a lot of it has to do with just the time that it came out, where the fighting games of that era were of a very specific type on consoles,
Hmm.
and this really kind of differentiated itself, and so maybe it just was more accessible
Yeah.
to a lot of kids who were playing video games at that time.
Hmm.
I can tell you it's not the deepest or most challenging fighting game out there.
But it's
Even
fun.
even of its time, it wasn't. But what is there is definitely made with a lot of attention to detail, and it is a legitimate fighter. And I think that if this was your first fighting game or your first X-Men game, you probably weren't disappointed. I
No,
hope you weren't.
no, I don't think anyone was. And it came with a ticket to see the movie. Do I remember that correctly? There was
Some
an
of them
insert.
did, yeah.
Yeah.
Originally, yeah, the first run of them,
Yeah.
yeah, that did happen. There was a lot of promotion stuff that went on. So we did a demo version of the game that got put in boxes of Nabisco Corporation cereal.
Okay. That's cool.
Actually, I brought disc with me. I don't know if it'll.
Oh
So
yeah, it's showing right there.
that's a master for the one that went into the Nabisco boxes of, I don't know. I don't even remember what they made. Uh, your
That's
breakfast cereal.
and
So
it
there
came
was
out. I'm sorry, go.
so there's just a lot of, Activision had a great promotional department, and they just knew kind of how to get the word out. It was great.
And you guys pubbed the day the movie came out, right? Online. There's some of the dates are off, but a lot of the references have it the same day the movie was released.
If it wasn't day and date, it was
Yeah.
intentionally very close.
Okay.
And I'm sure, kind of with physical distribution,
Yeah.
that is a little squishy.
Yeah.
But it was definitely meant to release day and date with the film. That was part of, sort of the entire concept for teaming up with Fox in the first place, is to kind of team up like the X-Men to be kind of greater than either of us individually could be. We could really push this kind of over the, push it over the hill a lot better together.
So, Jay, I know we've been talking for an hour and a half, but you were working on X-Men Legends, and if you have a couple more
Hmm.
minutes, I want to ask you about your experience on working on X-Men Legends to go from Mutant Academy to X-Men Legends. What were you doing with that game?
Well, so sort of my love of games at that time centered a lot around Diablo 2 and Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2. I was really into RPGs and action RPGs specifically. And I kept, as we're working on this game, I just kept saying, you know, it really feels like a great world to set an RPG in.
Mm-hmm.
And these are great characters. It just makes perfect sense for this to be an action RPG. And I kept kind of proselytizing that throughout the studio, and just kept kind of putting bugs in people's ear. I actually think the original name that I floated for Mutant Academy was X-Men Legends. And
Ah,
I remember we focus test Mutant Academy. They had a room with like this wall that was made out of glass, and it was that, you'd just go into this little hallway behind the glass and sit there and watch the people they brought in, and they'd ask them, okay, well, what did you think of this? What did you think of that? And here, let's test the names. And uh, X-Men Legends wasn't on the short list, so
wow, that's interesting.
but they wanted it to be kind of a fighting school, and that's the Mutant Academy came into, and it was a tie-in, with the Institute, so it made sense.
Yeah.
But so I just held on to that name, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to write a proposal for this action RPG, and um, we had a executive producer on the floor named Dave Stoll, who we'd always just, the great thing about Activision at that time is you just spend so much time commingling, and someone would bring over the game and say, hey, can you give me an idea or test this out or whatever. We were just constant flow of creative ideas. And he at one point said, I'd really love to make a game based on acrobats.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, what, like these circus acrobats, it could be a fighting game, and they would just combine their powers together, and they'd be able to throw them at each other or whatever. And I was like, okay, I mean, I could see that being fun. I don't know about the circus angle. And so I kind of held on to that. And so when I was writing the proposal for this, the whole idea that I thought the hook would be is that X-Men are a team. They're
Yeah.
not Superman going against the world. They are this group of people who are greater than each of their parts. And so if they can work together like the old fastball special,
Mm-hmm.
that would be just an awesome premise for what would differentiate this game from other games. So we got it all set up. I was moving to Dallas. My wife had taken a job. She had actually was joining a practice in the Dallas area. She delivers babies around here. And
It's a good job.
so we were fixing to be pretty far away from Los Angeles, but there was a developer in Dallas named Edge of Reality that was working on Spider-Man, the Nintendo 64 version of Spider-Man. And so they said, well, why don't you go and help them finish that up? Why don't you be our producer in Dallas? And so we got that wrapped up and had started working on X-Men Legends there with Edge of Reality. They decided that they were more comfortable in Austin, Texas. They're like, "Hey, we're gonna move to Austin, Texas," and I'm like, "The babies don't leave Dallas." I can't. So
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah.
So at that point, I had to kind of turn over everything that I'd done to Activision and join a group that was in Dallas because Activision didn't have any more stuff going on locally.
Gotcha.
And so I really didn't have anything to do with the core development of X-Men Legends. It went to Raven and it
Yeah.
kind of disappeared for a while and didn't hear back. And occasionally I'd get sent something and say, "Hey, what do you think of this?" or whatever. But it was really Raven's baby.
Hmm.
And I really love what they did with it. And I think they hit some really great notes with it, including the cell shading
Yeah.
and just the kind of the throwing mechanic. And it really just, it's a great game, but I did not have any role in the active development of it. But I think some of the ideas that were on that original design document, you
Hmm.
can see a few of them did kind of get through.
Yeah, and I think Patrick Lippo, who was the games director, mentioned Mutant Academy when we spoke to him. I don't remember if it was on the interview proper or it was just before when we were chatting. But yeah, you guys, your influence on the X-Men games. I mean, Mutant Academy, Jay, thank you so much for being here
I really
today.
enjoyed this. No,
Jay,
appreciate it.
Jay, what kind of projects do you have coming up?
So I'm the studio vice president of a company called Balanced Media Technology, and we create AI and machine learning training solutions that are integrated into video games.
Oh,
And so our kind of vision is that every moment that you spend playing a game is doing something good for the world, or that actually creates real world um, effects. And
that's
so
awesome.
we've created games where you can that you play that while you're playing them, you're training a machine learning algorithm to help diagnose um, age-related macular degeneration, which like 60 something percent of the population will eventually get, and it helps. Their optical coherence tomography scans. It gets really kind of lots of big technical terms, but essentially what happens is every machine learning algorithm takes data and learns over from being trained over and over again. Now you can do it the boring way, or you can put that training integrate it into a video game,
Hmm.
and then crowdsource that training.
Yeah.
And so you can do a lot of really cool things with that. And so that's where we are in developing a variety of games around that concept.
And Jay, for folks like me who try to hunt people like you down on the interwebs, is there any place fans can go to engage with you on social media, tell them, tell you how much they love the game, etc., some of your past work?
Well, I appreciate that. I don't have much of a presence on social media because, I'm a producer and
Yeah,
we're generally more behind the scenes kind of fellas.
yeah.
But you could, the Balanced Media, Balanced, BALANCEDMT. You can reach out on Twitter or Facebook or any, even LinkedIn if you're that kind of person. and it'll get to me.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, Jay, thank you so much for for being with us today.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for inviting me. I
You
appreciate
bet.
it.